people are joining me. Let me give us myself a second because we are officially live on all spaces and places. Okay, so first and foremost, hey Miss Lulu, I see all my favorite people joining. Now, I'm super excited to have this conversation because if you do not know and you haven't been following me, what is the problem? Because you and I should be fast friends, especially if you are joining this live. So there's a couple different reasons why I'm doing this. One of the reasons is because if you don't know, my TEDx talk, The Audacity to Go Small, went live yesterday. Where's my own clapper? Hold on. I'll be having clapper. Here we go. I'm going to celebrate my own self. Because getting a TEDx talk is a big deal and I'm super excited about it. So, one of the things that I wanted to talk about is how powerful this talk can be. And a lot of individuals focus on getting a TEDx talk or a TED talk because they want to treat it as a milestone. They want to treat it as a bucket list item. And I believe that a great talk should not just be a bucket list item, it should be a business asset, and I'm treating it as such. It is my intellectual property. It is something that I believed in, but more importantly, it's something that I've lived, I've breathed, I've understood, and I still continue to operate to this day. So just to give you some context, my TEDx talk actually went live pretty quickly. Okay. Like I have talked to other individuals who have given talks, and it's taking sometimes a couple of months for it to upload. So shout out to the TEDx Pontiac team. That's where I gave my TEDx talk. If you're not familiar with Pontiac, it is a suburb of Detroit, Michigan. And it was amazing, down to the media day, the graphics. I mean, it really was a small town gathering around a group of about 18 of us speakers. And we really were able to speak life and share our big idea with the world. So let's talk about my big idea we're sharing. And it's all about the audacity to go small. And you might be thinking, what exactly does that mean? I believe, especially right now, between culture, social media, we have been pressured, bullied into going big. I mean, it really is everywhere. You hear the sayings, go big or go home, dream big. And sometimes I don't think that we understand how much pressure to perform that puts on us, especially as business owners and entrepreneurs. And I believe that when I did an audit of my life, many of the biggest breakthroughs were not big and massive. They were small, they were tiny. I listened to the small, still voice. When everybody else was going right, I decided to go left. And I believe that that could be a blessing for everybody else because sometimes I feel like the pressure to go big is actually diluting our focus. Okay. So let's talk about the title. Audacity, right? What does audacity really mean? Audacity is having some courage. Audacity is putting your chest out. And audacity is really about you doing and committing to something with a little bit of fire, a little bit of grit, and a little bit of grace. Um, and at first, my title was The Audacity to Niche because I'm a business owner. And I believe that sometimes we need to be all in versus going all over the place. And a lot of the business owners, the entrepreneurs, and the speakers that I would talk to, they were all over. And I'm like, you need to focus, you need to go niche. But then as I was getting coaching, so if you're not familiar with the TEDx process, you don't just get up there and give a speech. Like you have to submit your talk, you have to submit an abstract, you get a coach that works with you to perfect your idea, to pull it out. And then once it's all said and done, you can't change that at the end. And then you give your talk, and then the organizer has to upload it to TED. TED goes through a background to make sure that you're not plagiarizing, you ain't saying anything crazy. And then if you get approved, then they upload you to the TED platform. And that's where I'm at right now. There's some people who don't get approved, which sucks because you do all that work not to get approved, right? But I'm approved. And the original idea was the audacity to go niche. And they're like, Quinn, you got to remember, you're not talking to business owners and entrepreneurs, because I love business owners and entrepreneurs. If you're a business owner or an entrepreneur, type me in the comments, right? Because y'all my people. And that's where my brain was. So it took a different level of my brain to actually create a talk that was universal enough that could apply to your life, your business, your career, your relationship. So I had to zoom out a little bit because I'm actually a laser focused type of person to figure out how can I make a talk that would resonate with the entrepreneurs, the business owners, the people who are looking for someone who they like or they love, right? So that's what stretched me a little bit. And the idea of niche is very jargon and term for business world. The feedback that I got was, you got to remember, Quinn, this is not just people watching in the US. TEDx talks have the potential for people to watch in Korea, in China, in Russia, in Africa, in South America, in Honduras, right? So people might not understand what a niche is. So I was like, okay, makes sense. So I changed my title from the audacity to niche to the audacity to go small. Then I had like this subtitle, and they were like, nope, the best talks have no subtitle. You got to get straight to the point, right? So I was like, okay, let's cut the subtitle. So that I ended up on the audacity to go small. And honestly, it's interesting because this is not the first TEDx talk that I've applied to. I've actually applied to a lot of them. So if you are thinking about doing it, just understand that paying attention to the theme and applying multiple times is part of the process. I don't know one person who applied once and got in, right? So it's one of those things that you have to fight for. You have to be intentional about. And um this idea is really, really near and dear to my heart because it's really me practicing what it is that I preach. And when I think about the businesses that I've started and I think about just the relationships that I've had, it was all of the small things that really was instrumental and massive, within my business. So a lot of you know me as a speaker and as an MC, and I love using my gift of gab to motivate and inspire. But I actually had a bag business called the Purse Paparazzi. I don't know if y'all know about this or not, right? But I had a bag business for several years called the Purse Paparazzi. And I remember in the beginning, I had all types of handbags. I was selling clutches, purses, fashion handbags. And then I was invited to an AKA event at Martin's West. So AKA is for the ladies of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated. My husband had a coworker who was a member of the sorority and invited us to be vendors. And I walked in and it was pink and green, everything. And I was like, ooh. And I was like, you know what? This is it. That event inspired me. And I told my husband, I was like, listen, I know that we're kind of doing generic purses for any and everybody. I said, we got to go small. I said, so that was the first license we got. We got the license with the AKAs and started making custom bags. And I remember getting that license. And then I got licensed with the Deltas. I got licensed with the Zetas. I got licensed with the Sigma Gamma Rhos. And then we ended up getting 11 licenses with HBCUs, historically Black college and universities. And I remember sharing with people like, yeah, I'm going to get the AKA license. And people were very discouraging. They were like, do you know out of all the Black women or all the women who go to college, you know what I mean? Less than like 5% actually pledge a sorority. And if you're going after HBCUs, there's less than 10% of historically Black college and universities. You're better off with going with major universities and you can get more buy-in. And something in my spirit, so I got to listen to your spirit, right? Or what I said in my speech, because you got to go watch it, that small, still voice was like niche. And I super serve those ladies. And I say, I'm not a member of a sorority. However, I love the sisterhood. I love how they, go 10 toes down for their organizations, the women in the sorority, how they rock their paraphernalia and their merch. And I'm like, this is a client base that is super loyal. And I made a six-figure business off of that. And it's crazy because if you look at the numbers, there are more individuals who go to a college who don't pledge a sorority than there are who go to a university and pledge. So I picked a niche um to kind of create these handbags and it proved to be profitable, right? So that was like my first taste of seeing a big market of purses and picking a lane and succeeding in it. And then when I began to, really decide that, okay, I need to get back to my love of speaking because it was hard, y'all. When I first started speaking, wasn't nobody checking for me. They was like, "You're a good speaker, but we ain't got no budget." So I was like, "Well, maybe I'm not supposed to be speaking, right? Maybe I'm supposed to be doing something else." So that's when I took my little break and I went hard with Purse Paparazzi, and then I came back to speaking and I started doing it and loving it, and I picked my lane. And then when COVID happened, shout out to COVID. People don't like the pandemic, but it really was a time for a lot of people to kind of get still, get quiet, and listen to what was their next, right? And I had a person named is Felicia Hatcher. Shout out to Felicia Hatcher from Black Ambition, who was like, hey, we're having an event. We're used to being virtual. I mean, in person, we're going virtual now. We love your personality. We love your energy. Hey, Lenitra, I see you out here. She's like, "Would you mind being our host and being our MC?" And I'm like, "Sure." And I loved it. And I was like, "You know what? I think I want to focus my energy and my effort on hosting and MCing instead of just being a speaker. Like I can speak, but I can also MC and I can also host." So I did that. And let me tell you something. The majority of my friends, they keynote speakers, right? They out here getting 15, $20,000 for a 1 hour presentation. So when I was like, yeah, I want to MC, when MCing was not popular, people was giving me the side eye, the shade. But something inside me said, choose the road less traveled. Something said to me, even though the speaking industry is a $6.5 billion industry, the majority of the people that I knew were not checking for the MC role. So I chose to create a small lane for myself as an MC, and I made it a host highway. That's what I say. You know how people say pick a lane? I picked a lane and made it a host highway. And now 90% of my business comes from MCing and event hosting. So I share that with you because it takes audacity, it takes courage, it takes confidence, it takes a little bit of crazy to go the less traveled. When everybody else in your circle is going right and you decide to go left, when you listen to that small, still voice, it really is about you being courageous. And I did that my entire life. So when I was thinking about this TEDx talk and the audacity to go small, it's like, it's not a concept or a theory. It's something that I've lived and it's something that has worked for me. Even when I work with other speakers and entrepreneurs and I teach them how to verbalize their value using luxury language, if you know anything about luxury language, it's about choosing different words and language that can elevate your experience or your expertise. So I'll give you an example how small can just be so dynamic in your world. Imagine if you're dating, you meet a man or a woman that you're really excited and they say, "I work at McDonald's" or "I work for McDonald's." Those little words, at and for, is all the difference. Because if someone says, "I work at McDonald's," there's no problem with that. But you'll probably assume that maybe they're a manager or a cashier or they work the drive through, right? But if somebody says, "I work for McDonald's," they're probably in a C-suite position. They're probably figuring out where are the next 10 franchise they want to open up in the United States or even Africa or Europe, right? Like it's a difference. So I realized when I kind of took a step back and I began to analyze different types of entrepreneurs and speakers who were really doing it big, all of them had a niche. All of them started small. All of them had their own lane. And I'm like, at the end of the day, especially as business owners and entrepreneurs, big has become a burden. Big has become pressure. Big is actually even becoming a bully. And if you want to lead, if you want to succeed, if you want to be super successful and earn ridiculous revenue, you got to choose a lane. You got to focus in. And people always ask me, "Well, how do you get started with MCing?" I went all in. Everybody's all over the place. People trying to like do a little something here. They're trying to do something here. They trying to sell cars on Monday. They out here selling speeches on Tuesday. They got chicken dinners they selling on Thursday. They are too many slashes and too many dashes, right? It's like this person is a speaker, author, coach, bike rider, dog walker. Like it's too much. So the small is where the significance is. Small is where originality is. Small is where innovation is truly born. And when I realized that, I was like, the world needs to know this because there are so many people that are literally having big back them in the wall because we feel like because of society and social media and the world that we live in that bigger is always better. But I realized that everyone who got started and they did their first speech or they hosted their own event, they didn't start out with 50 million people. They probably started out with 5 or 2. So every one of us had a small beginning. And every one of us, if I think if we lean into the small, we lean into the scary, we lean into the simple, we lean into strategic, that is our superpower. So my whole idea with the audacity to go small is to challenge the thought process that bigger is better. I believe bigger is not always better. I believe that small can be your superpower. Small is strategic. Small is where you can like create your own lane and become an innovator, a pioneer, and a trailblazer. And small doesn't get the love that it deserves, right? Because even if you're going to do something, you want to dip your toe in it first. But some of us have been brainwashed to think that big is always better. And I disagree. So I'm just curious if you have already watched my TEDx talk. I just want you to put yes in the comments. And if you have not, just type not yet. It's okay because you still have time. However, if you know anything about a TEDx talk, the first 48 to 72 hours is crucial. Okay. So I got a small favor. Okay. I got a small favor for everyone who is watching. If you're catching the replay, just put replay in the comments, but I want you to watch it. If you just go to YouTube and type in the Audacity to Go Small, I'll pop up. Monique actually put it in the comments on Facebook. So click that link. I want you to watch it the whole way through. It's 10 minutes, y'all. I promise you. It's not a freaking sermon. It is a summary. And I want you to leave a comment because that's how YouTube is going to reward me. That's how this message is going to get to the masses. Ultimately, what I want to do with this talk is really begin to make it a keynote and a breakout session. I want to talk to entrepreneurs and business owners and women leaders about how they can have the audacity to go small and maximize and monetize what others are missing. And that is the beauty of having the audacity to go small. And let me be crystal freaking clear. When I'm talking about going small, I'm not talking about shrinking. I'm not talking about playing it safe. I'm not talking about lowering your standards. I'm talking about looking at the big picture in the industry that you like or you love and noticing the small things that other people are overlooking, not paying attention to, and using that as your strategic superpower to go all in. So, small is about strategy. Small is about noticing those things that people are not thinking about. I remember when I was like, yeah, I definitely want to be an MC. You know what happened, Daphne? You know what I did, Sherry? I was at events. And I'm like, my leg is tapping. I'm over here slow rocking. I'm rubbing my thighs. LB, I know that you can appreciate this as well. Why? Because I'm like, this has got to be the most boring event. Who did they get to introduce this person? That was horrible. Who, like, I had all these questions about the energy was low, the MC was bad, just small things I kept noticing at the event. I'm like, man, if that was me, I would have been like, next, coming to the stage, we got Daphne B. Lattimore. She's a speaker, she's an entrepreneur, she's da 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 da, and she's here to rock your world and blow your mind. Like, I would have gave that energy to that person who was coming to the stage. And I realized that the person who was doing the introducing was low energy, not excited. And I'm like, you just did that girl disservice. She 2 seconds from having a cure to cancer, and you just introduced her like she just created Advil. Like, they're not the same, right? I would notice like after lunchtime where the audience would kind of be in a drought and there was no music or no energy to get them riled back up to turn their attention to the main stage. So all these small things that kept annoying me or bothering me is what made me a great MC, because I noticed the small things. So one of the things that I tell people, when you're trying to figure out what you should do, what are the small things that irk or annoy you, right? And you're like, man, I would do that differently, or I would say that differently, or I would question this and do this a little bit differently. Those small things that are big in your eyes, that's where your energy should go. So, in the talk, we all have various ideas as entrepreneurs, as speakers, as leaders, right? I challenge everyone to give their idea what I call the 3S test. And that is you giving your idea, whether you think it's small, it's big, it has potential, or if you think it's like, is this even worth pursuing? You can give it the 3S test by asking yourself these 3 questions about your idea. Now, the first question is it simple? The second question is it strange, right? And the third question, you got to go watch the TED Talk to go to learn that, right? But when you're thinking about the idea, right? And if it has big potential in your life, in your business, in your relationship, in your career, is it simple to explain? Right? Like, the reason why I think the audacity to go small is having legs is because you get it. You understand. I can tell you, bigger is not better. Small is where strategy happens, right? You understand it. If you have an idea and it takes you 2 to 3 days to answer or explain to somebody else, it's probably not the right idea, because it should be simple to explain. The second part of it, is it scary? Like, it should be you going against the grain. It should make you feel a little bit uncomfortable. Matter of fact, it should probably be so simple that you're like, it got to be more to it than that. Can I tell y'all? Sometimes it's just simply not more to it than that. Sometimes it really is that simple. And sometimes, because if it's not hustle culture, if it's not simple, if it's not easy, we feel like it's wrong. And sometimes the best ideas do not require so much emotional capacity. Sometimes the best ideas actually require you noticing what others are missing, noticing what others are overlooking, you being in tuned with what seems obvious to you but completely overlooked by other people. And that's how you maximize and monetize the smallness that can produce big results. And it just shows up everywhere. When I think about some of the actors and actresses that I love, like they didn't start out getting box office blockbuster movies. They had a small role here, they had a small role there. They might have said two or three lines, and they did well with those small two or three lines that got them to a leading role. It's the same thing in our lives, in our business. If you're dating someone, it's rarely the big things that be like, oh, I like him or I like her. It's the small things. They call you every day. They tell you your hair looks pretty. They ask you to go out on a date. They say you smell nice. They give you compliments. Those are the small things that you be like, you know what? I likes him with an S. I likes him or I likes her, right? So it's never these big things. And I feel like the audacity to go small is such a refreshing message for now, because we are living in a world where capitalism is just shining. Everything is about money. Everything is about big. Everything is about bold. Everything is about, expansion, expansion and scaling. And that can feel scary. That can feel heavy. So, what if you can just disregard that? What if you can just let it go? What if you can say, instead of trying to do a conference or something for 100,000 people, what if you said, I want to do the best nurse conference for 100 nurses? Like, that's a win. Like, the win is going smaller, the win is going more strategic. Sometimes we overwhelm ourselves by trying to be big and bold and loud. And sometimes it's the quiet strength, the quiet strategy, the quietness that can allow it to be our competitive advantage, because now they don't see us coming, right? Like, literally, I 2 to 3 times maybe people were asking me about how to become a speaker or how to become, an MC. And I'm not on social media yelling at the rooftops on how you need a big stage. I'm just sharing my journey, and I think that that's what we miss. So I am not going to talk forever. I just want to say that I appreciate everyone who has showed up on this live. Hey, Dr. Farah, so excited that you were here. Dominique, hey, girl, hey, I see what you're doing with speakers. Robert, please make sure you go to YouTube and you type in the audacity to go small. And I want you to do 3 things for me, okay? If you are okay with doing 3 things for me, can you put 3 in the comments? I just want to make sure that you're picking up what I'm putting down, okay? Can you do 3 things for me? If you are committed to doing 3 things, no matter if you're catching this live or you're going to catch the replay, I want to know if you're willing to do 3 small things for me today. So the first thing is, go to YouTube, type in the audacity to go small, and watch all of it. It's less than 10 minutes. If you only watch 5 minutes, it's not going to count. Okay. I don't ask y'all for much, but today I got an ask. Okay. And the ask is, watch the entire um TED Talk, right? The second thing I want you to do is, I want you to comment if something resonated with you. If I talked about how small is not insignificant and small is where significance begins, type that in the comments. If I talk about how big is a bully in our lives, type that in the comments on YouTube, right? If you want to say a little something, something on Facebook or Instagram or LinkedIn, that's great. But I need you to comment directly on the video on YouTube, right? That's the second thing. The third and last thing is, I need you to share it with your network or tag somebody who you know needs to hear and have the audacity to go small, because that is how I am able to reach more people with this small message that can really birth big results in their business, their life, their brand, or their career. Okay. Because at the end of the day, many of us, this is going to be an exhale, because we've been trying to chase the big stage, the big client, the big opportunity. And here's the funny thing: if someone is being chased, they run away, right? Like, if you're chasing something, it's further away from you. But if you can sit in something, you can attract it. And sometimes I think that's the exhaustion, because we're trying to chase that next big thing, not realizing that if you can sit back and have a strategy to attract, That is the true goal. That's the ambition. That is where the win really happens. Okay. All right, y'all. It is officially 12:28. I want to be on here for a couple of minutes. Thank you, Sherry. Thank you, Dr. Farah. Thank you, Daphne. Thank you, Dr. Ariel Jordan. I appreciate all of you. And if you're catching me live, I want you to know one thing and one thing only. Big has been a burden in our lives for way too long. 2026 is definitely the season and the time for you to have the audacity to go small. What does that mean? That means analyzing your business, analyzing your industry, analyzing your relationship, analyzing your life, analyzing your career, and pulling out the small things that you can do to advance in a big way. All right. Thank you so much for joining me. Again, my name is Quinn Conyers, and if I leave you with one thing, I want you to do this. Have the audacity to go small, but more importantly, go watch it on YouTube, like it, leave a comment, and share it with somebody else. I'll talk to you soon.